ICD-10 codes for bedbound. Functional quadriplegia, ICD-10 codes for bedbound. Functional quadriplegia, an ICD-10 diagnosis code is Z74.01, bedbound. This code is used to indicate a patient's reduced mobility and can be billable for reimbursement purposes. There are many types of patients who are classified as bedbound. Some are non-ambulatory, while others are wheelchair-bound. For example, people who are obese may be considered bedbound, and they are likely to be in need of bariatric beds. Bedbound condition. A medical condition that leaves an individual bedbound is called a bedbound condition. It describes a person unable to move from his or her bed. It is commonly referred to as a wheelchair-bound condition, although it is sometimes used interchangeably. A patient who is wheelchair-bound is essentially tied to his or her wheelchair. The code Z74.01 for this condition is M62.3. It is a billable diagnosis, and it is useful for reimbursement purposes. Another idiom for bedbound is bedfast. These terms are not the same. While bedbound is a condition that makes a person unable to move, the term bedbound simply means that the patient is confined to his or her bed. In addition, the word bedbound implies that the person has severe physical limitations and is therefore unable to walk. This is the same as bedridden, though the definition is different. A hospital bed is specially designed for a medical condition. The bed allows a person to recline his or her body, and can be used to ease pain and improve circulation. This is a different term from bedridden, which is another term for bedbound. The latter refers to a person who has been inactive, or whose body is inactive and unable to move. The latter condition has a much higher incidence of death and disability in patients. Bedbound is a medical term for a person who cannot move and is confined to a bed. However, the term is not the same as bedridden. A person can be confined to their bed, but is not considered to be bedbound. It is a synonym for bedridden. In other words, bedbound is a state of being unable to move. The patient is in a wheelchair and has no control over their movements. The term bedbound is a generic term for a person who is confined to a wheelchair. The definition of bedbound in the ICD-10 is a medical condition in which a patient cannot move. The word bedbound refers to a condition in which a person is physically tied to a bed. The term is synonymous with bedridden in the medical dictionary. The difference between a wheelchair and a bed is a big factor in determining the cause of a health problem. The term bedbound is similar to the term bedridden in British English. The former means a person who is unable to move. The latter, however, implies a person who is unable to move, or is confined to a wheelchair. The former also implies that a person is confined to a chair. It is a common condition, and is often described as being bedfast by the medical community. The term bedbound implies that a person is physically tied to a wheelchair. A person who is confined to a bed has limited mobility and is dependent on a wheelchair to get around. A patient who cannot move is referred to as chairbound. Likewise, the term chairfast indicates that the patient is unable to move from a chair. In the United States, a patient who is chairbound has difficulty with walking or moving. The word bedbound is a British term. It implies that a person is tied to a chair. In contrast, bedfast means a person who cannot move from their bed. The term is also used in American English. Moreover, ICD-10 codes for a wheelchair are also standardized. If you are wheelchair-bound, you can use ICD-10 code M62.3 for reimbursement purposes. There are 5 ICD-10 CM codes for mental retardation. These are used to indicate a person's diagnosis for reimbursement purposes. The Z72.3 code is a billable code, but it cannot be used to indicate a patient's diagnosis. This type of ICD is not a legal term, but it is recognized in the United States. The new standard is not mandatory for all countries, but it will be mandatory for all those in the US. Read this. What does functional quadriplegia mean? Functional quadriplegia, quadriplegics, quadriplegics.